Hello, my name is Reverend Melanie Brooks, and I'm presenting the fifth saying of Christ, I thirst, which is based on John chapter 19, verse 28. After this, Jesus, knowing that all things were now accomplished, that the scripture might be fulfilled, said, I thirst. This fifth saying, that of Christ of all the sayings he made on the cross, deals exclusively with his humanness. All the other statements were dealing with relationships. In the first statement, he asked the Father to forgive his perpetrators because they didn't know what they were doing. In his second statement, he told a thief that was hanging next to him that today he would be with him in paradise. The third saying, Jesus instructed John to take care of his mother. And then in the fourth statement, Jesus asked his father why he had abandoned him. So these four previous statements were dealing with relationships. But even before we come to the fifth statement, he had endured suffering the night before. If you go back to the time when he was in the Garden of Gethsemane, the prayer to his father, asking God if there was another way to accomplish God's will. But ultimately, he surrendered to the purpose and the way the purpose was to be carried out. Jesus' prayer was so intense that Luke chapter 22 verse 44 says, and being in agony, he prayed more earnestly. Then his sweat became like great drops of blood falling down to the ground. Then there was his arrest. He was carried from court to court. He was beaten. He was scorned. A crown of thorns was placed and crushed on his head. He was slapped, spit upon. He was beaten. He was questioned all night long by Pilate and by the high priest of the Sanhedrin council. All this emotional turmoil he endured all night. Then the following morning, after being up all night with the interrogations, he was tasked to carry his cross on a 3-hour walk through the city of Jerusalem to Golgotha on the way to the cross. He had lost a lot of blood from the night before and during the walk to Golgotha. Then once he got to Golgotha, nails were pierced in his hands and his feet to a cross. And once that was accomplished, he was lifted on the cross and placed into a hole for the cross to hold in place so that his body would hang from that cross. His body was contorted, and he was trying to find a way to find comfort while being on that cross. He was struggling to breathe, enduring this suffering. This was agony that he was enduring. And now we come to this point that he thirsted. This thirst that he had showed his human capacity, which is why in Hebrews 4:15 we are reminded, for we do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize with our weaknesses, but was in all points tempted as we are, yet without sin. Jesus suffered anything any human could endure. His body was so stressed to the point that he was parched and wanted his thirst to be quenched. Psalm 22:15 says, my strength is dried up like a potsherd, and my tongue clings to my jaws. You have brought me to the dust of death, forecasting the sufferings that he would endure. Jesus' thirst was a physical thirst. But as I reflect on the story of the woman at the well in John chapter 4, when she met Jesus and he asked her to give him a drink of water, she challenged him. One, that he, being a Jew, would dare to ask her, being a Samaritan and a woman, for water. And then he didn't have anything wherewith to draw his own water. Jesus, in turn, told her of a water that he could give her that was everlasting, that she would never thirst again, springing up into everlasting life. And so her thinking was that if she could obtain this water, she wouldn't have to come to this well every day. This physical water could change her life. She thought this water could quench her human thirst. But what Jesus was offering her was spiritual living water, a spiritual water that could quench the thirsting of her soul. We all experience droughts in our lives. I would say that what we are going through right now is a drought. We are to remain in our homes for the safety not only of ourselves, but our communities. During this time of drought, there is a spiritual living water that only Jesus can supply that can quench our thirsting souls. Him suffering on the cross the way that he did, him being thirsty in his physical body made possible for us to have our spiritual thirst quenched. Jesus is our living water. He says in John 7:37 and 38, on the last day, that great day of the feast, Jesus stood and cried out, saying, if anyone thirsts, let him come to me and drink. He who believes in me, as the scriptures have said, out of his heart will flow rivers of living water. This is possible because of what he has done for us. He quenches the spiritual thirsting of our souls. There is a hymn we used to sing years ago in the church. The chorus says, fill my cup, Lord. I lift it up, Lord. Come and quench this thirsting of my soul. Bread of heaven, feed me till I want no more. Here's my cup. Fill it up and make me whole. Jesus' thirst on the cross that was for his physical comfort made it possible for our spiritual thirst to be quenched. And if you today, my friend, have a spiritual thirst that needs to be quenched, I offer you the Son of God, who on the cross had a thirst in his physical body that made it possible for us to have a spiritual quenching through his living water. I offer him to you today. Won't you receive him? Won't you accept this living water from him that refreshes us, cleanses us like the woman at the well? Accept this water that he offers you. It changes, refreshes, blots out the darkness of our souls. Your friends will look on you and see that you have changed and that the living water will begin to bubble out of you. It impacts your environment and your family when you accept this living water that is made possible by Jesus saying on the cross in his humanness, I thirst. In response to his statement, the soldiers gave him sour wine or vinegar, which did not quench his thirst. But I thank God that he endured that thirstiness in his humanness so that he could quench the spiritual thirstiness of our souls. God bless you.